After my husband died, his sons came to me with cold smiles and a stack of legal papers. They said, "We want the estate, the business, everything." My lawyer begged me to fight back. But I looked them in the eyes and calmly replied, "Fine. Take it all." The moment I signed those papers, they smiled like they had already won. But seconds later, their attorney turned pale. Because hidden inside that inheritance was a disaster they never saw coming. Before we begin, comment your city below. I want to see how far this story reaches. The funeral flowers were still fresh when Sydney and Edwin sat across from me in Floyd's office. 22 years of marriage. And suddenly I was being treated like a stranger in my own home. Sydney leaned back in Floyd's leather chair like he already owned it. "Dad left the house, the Tahoe villa, and the business assets to us," he said calmly. Then Edwin added with fake sympathy, "You'll still receive the insurance money. Around 200,000. 200,000. That was apparently the value of 22 years of loyalty, sacrifice, and standing beside their father through every difficult moment of his life. But they weren't done. Sydney opened another document. "There's also around $180,000 in medical debt. Since you were Floyd's wife, those bills legally fall to you." I felt my chest tighten. Not only were they throwing me out of my home, they were leaving me almost broke. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was the way they looked at me. Like I was some temporary inconvenience that needed to disappear quickly. Still, I didn't argue. I simply nodded and said, "I need some time." That night, the house felt painfully silent. I sat alone in Floyd's office surrounded by photographs, books, and memories of the life we built together. That's when I found it. A small brass key hidden inside one of his desk drawers. No label. No explanation. Just a key Floyd clearly wanted hidden. And somehow, I knew it mattered. Outside the window, I watched Sydney and Edwin standing beside their cars, laughing together before driving away. Celebrating. They thought they had already won. But deep inside, something told me Floyd wasn't finished yet. The next morning, I met with our longtime attorney, Martin Morrison. The moment I told him I was considering signing everything over, he stared at me in disbelief. "Colleen, this doesn't make sense," he said. "You could fight this will. Something about it feels wrong." I asked him one simple question. How long would a legal battle take? He hesitated. Months, maybe years. Years of courtrooms, lawyers, stress, public humiliation. I was exhausted already. So I quietly said, "Prepare the papers." Martin rubbed his forehead in frustration. I've never seen someone walk away from this much money voluntarily. But what I didn't tell him was that I couldn't stop thinking about Floyd's key. It felt like the answer to everything was hidden somewhere, waiting for me. 2 days later, I finally discovered what the key opened. A safety deposit box at First National Bank. The bank manager recognized Floyd immediately and escorted me downstairs into a private room. The second the box opened, my entire world changed. Inside were files, financial records, printed emails, private investigation reports, and a letter written in Floyd's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The first sentence shattered me. "If you're reading this, then the boys finally showed you who they really are." I could barely breathe. Floyd had known. He had uncovered everything before he died. Sydney was buried in gambling debt. Edwin had been secretly running fraudulent investment schemes. And while I was sitting beside Floyd's hospital bed every night, his own sons were planning how to steal his estate. One email read, "Colleen won't understand the finances. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late. I felt sick reading it. But then I found something even more shocking. A hidden investment account worth $4.7 million. Attached to it was Floyd's handwritten note. "This is our real money." I moved it before the boys could touch it. Tears filled my eyes. Floyd hadn't betrayed me. He had been protecting me all along. Then I found the final document. The real will. Not the fake version Sydney showed me. This one left everything to me. Everything. And there was one final twist. Months before his death, Floyd had secretly mortgaged the house and the Tahoe villa. On paper, the properties looked incredibly valuable. But in reality, they were drowning in debt. Anyone who inherited them would inherit financial destruction. Suddenly, Floyd's entire plan became clear. His sons thought they were stealing a fortune. In reality, they were walking into a trap. That same evening, Sydney and Edwin invited me to dinner. They still believed I was confused, helpless, and easy to manipulate. So I played along. Bianca greeted me with fake warmth and expensive jewelry hanging from both wrists. The entire evening felt like a performance. Polite smiles, careful conversations, forced sympathy. Then halfway through dinner, I casually said, "It's strange. I recently found some financial documents and a safety deposit key I never knew about." The reaction was immediate. Edwin nearly dropped his wine glass. Sydney froze completely. For one brief second, their mask slipped. Fear. Real fear. Sydney quickly forced a smile. "Legal paperwork can be confusing, Colleen. Maybe you should let us review whatever you found." I smiled back calmly. "That's very sweet of you." But inside, I finally understood the truth. They weren't confident anymore. They were terrified. The following morning, I met with James Mitchell, the attorney Floyd secretly hired before his death. Unlike Martin's polished office, Mitchell's office was simple and quiet. But the man carried certainty in his voice. He laid out every piece of evidence Floyd had gathered. Forged signatures, fraudulent transfers, secret loans, financial theft. Enough evidence to send both Sydney and Edwin to prison. Then Mitchell leaned forward and said quietly, "Mrs. Whitaker, now the decision is yours. I could destroy them legally. Or I could let Floyd's final lesson destroy them instead." And honestly, that felt far more appropriate. The final meeting was held 3 days later inside Martin Morrison's conference room. Sydney walked in pretending to stay calm, but I could see panic hiding behind his eyes. Edwin looked even worse. James Mitchell placed the real will on the table. Then came the bank records, the investigation reports, the debts. With every new document, the color drained further from their faces. Finally, Sydney slammed his hand against the table. "This is insanity." Mitchell calmly replied, "No. This is evidence." The room went silent. Then I reached into my purse and slid one final document across the table. Sydney grabbed it immediately. As he read it, his expression collapsed. "You're giving us the properties?" Edwin asked weakly. "Yes," I replied. For a brief second, hope returned to their faces. Then I continued, "Along with every dollar of debt attached to them." Silence. Pure silence. The house, the villa, the business assets, all heavily mortgaged, all financial poison. They thought they were inheriting millions. Instead, they were inheriting ruin. "You can't do this," Sydney whispered. I looked directly into his eyes. "Actually, your father already did." Bianca started crying. Edwin looked completely broken. And for the first time in their lives, they realized they had lost. Not just financially. Completely. Mitchell then calmly explained the alternative. If they refused the inheritance, criminal charges would move forward immediately. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, prison. They had no choice. So with trembling hands, they signed everything. And just like that, the men who thought they had outsmarted everyone destroyed themselves. 3 months later, both brothers were financially ruined. Sidney filed for bankruptcy and entered gambling addiction treatment. Edwin lost his business completely. Bianca divorced him shortly afterward. And me? I sold the remaining assets, moved into a beautiful oceanfront cottage in Carmel, and started over. For the first time in decades, my life finally belonged to me. I planted gardens, took art classes, started volunteering, and eventually, I created a foundation to help women escape financial manipulation and abuse. Because Floyd's final gift wasn't just money. It was freedom. Freedom from fear. Freedom from dependence. Freedom from people who only valued me when they thought I was powerless. And sometimes, the people closest to you betray you the deepest. But one thing I learned through all of this is simple. Never underestimate a quiet person who finally learns the truth. If you enjoyed this story, comment below. What would you have done in my place?